A brand new study says a law degree boosts your earnings by 59%. And that number is going to cost some of you a fortune. I read this study the same way I'd read an LSAT argument. And the reasoning errors and how people are interpreting it are the exact same errors that show up on the test. And so I'm going to walk you through what this study actually says, what it leaves out, and why the conclusion most people are drawing from it does not follow from the evidence. Now, the data, of course, looks rock solid. Researchers at Yale and Vassar analyzed earnings records spanning more than 2 decades. Before law school, the average graduate was making about $55,000. After, about $132,000. And so that is a 59% increase, third highest of any graduate degree in America, behind only doctors and pharmacists. MBAs only saw a 16% bump. And so law degrees didn't just beat most graduate degrees, it crushed them. Now, the sample is massive, the researchers are credible, and the conclusion feels like a green light to go to law school, saying, go apply to law school, take on the debt, law school is worth it. Your parents are probably texting you this article right now. And if you're studying for the LSAT, you've probably been told to trust large data sets and peer-reviewed research. And so you'd think this should be settled. But not if you're reading carefully. There is a gap between what this study proves and what people are using it to conclude. And on that LSAT, that gap has a name. It's called an assumption. Now, the earnings in this study run from the early 1990s through 2018. The most recent data point it covers is already 7 years old. Of course, law school tuition has climbed since then. The legal job market looks different today. AI is reshaping how legal work gets done right now. And so you're making a decision about 2026 with data that stopped before the pandemic. On the LSAT, you'd flag this immediately. The evidence describes one time period, the conclusion applies to another. That is a temporal gap. The argument assumes conditions have not changed. And in legal education, that assumption is wrong. And I'll get to the biggest problem in a second. But first, here is something nobody's mentioning. This entire study is built on data from one state. The Texas Education Research Center provided the information. Now, of course, Texas has a strong legal market with several good law schools and a lower cost of living than New York or California. Now, whether these numbers translate to someone attending law school in the Northeast, the Midwest, or really anywhere else is an open question. The study doesn't address it, and the headlines definitely don't. On the LSAT, you would call this a scope problem. The evidence covers one population in one region. The conclusion people are drawing is universal, and that is a jump the data doesn't support. Now, let's talk about what this study is actually measuring and who it's measuring. It tracks people who finished law school and graduated and got their degree. It doesn't track the people who started law school, took on a year or two of debt, and then dropped out. Of course, those people exist. They have law school debt and no law degree. Their earnings certainly did not go up 59%. Their earnings probably went down because they lost years of income and gained debt with nothing to show for it. Now, when you only measure the winners, every investment's going to look brilliant. The study also reports averages. Average earnings before, average earnings after, average return. Now, averages are fine for describing populations, but you are not a population. You are a single individual choosing to go to law school at a particular price point. The researchers themselves found that higher ranked schools produced significantly higher returns, and they say it directly. A graduate of a top 14 law school walking into a $225,000 big law salary and a graduate of a school ranked 90th making $52,000 both get folded into that same 59%. On the LSAT, you've heard about this flaw. It is part to whole. What's true of the group on average is not necessarily true of any individual member. This study tells you what happened to law graduates as a whole. It tells you almost nothing about what will happen to you. Now, here's what I said I was going to come back to. When the researchers adjusted for the cost of law school, that 59% dropped to 41%. And they used average tuition to make that adjustment. But cost isn't just tuition, it's 3 years of lost income. It's 3 years of lost career momentum and lost promotions and lost retirement contributions that would have been compounding. It's the interest on your loans that starts accumulating even before you graduate. So the true opportunity cost of law school is much bigger than just your tuition. And even using just tuition, the return dropped by nearly a third. And so if you're paying full sticker price at a school that sends a third of its graduates into jobs that don't require a JD, your cost adjusted return could be much lower than 41%. It could even be negative. And the study, of course, is not modeling that. No headlines are mentioning that. Let me make this concrete. Say you take on $180,000 in debt to attend a law school ranked around 80th. The median starting salary there might be $65,000. You spent 3 years out of the workforce. You're repaying loans at 7% interest. Meanwhile, someone who went to a top 14 law school on a partial scholarship starts at $225,000 with less debt, and you both show up in this study's average. But your outcomes have almost nothing in common. Now, one more thing about the data. The study compares earnings before law school to earnings after, and it attributes the difference to the degree. On the LSAT, you would catch this also. It's a correlation causation problem. People who go to law school tend to be more ambitious and more credentialed than people who don't. And some of that earnings increase might have happened without the degree. And the study tries to control for this, and their methods are pretty reasonable, but the limitation is still real. Now, you might have seen a different stat floating around from a 2024 study. That one claimed a professional degree has a potential ROI of over 2,000% over a 40-year career. And that number sounds insane because it kind of is. A 40-year time horizon makes almost any investment look credible because of compounding. Your house would show a wild ROI over 40 years also. But that number tells you almost nothing about whether the next 3 years and $200,000 of your life are well spent. So don't let big numbers over long time horizons replace a clear-eyed look at where your first 5 years after graduation are going to look like. So that's the window where the debt either works for you or it buries you. Now, I know this is going to bother some of you, but if this study said law school returned 8% instead of 59%, you probably wouldn't still be sharing it, and your parents wouldn't be texting it to you either. Now, the comment I'm already going to get is, Steve, you sell LSAT prep. You make money when people go to law school. Why are you trying to talk people out of law school? And the truth is, I'm not trying to talk you out of law school. I want you to go to law school, crush the LSAT, get into a great school, and build a career you're proud of. That is my entire business. But I'd rather lose a customer today than watch someone take on $200,000 in debt based on a headline they didn't read carefully. If your numbers work for you, go, and I'll help you get there. If they don't, I just saved you 6 figures. Either way, you're better off knowing what's best for you. Now, I don't want to just tear the study apart and leave you without a plan. Here's how to figure out if law school makes sense for you specifically. First, you want to pick your target schools and be honest about where you're likely to get in based on your GPA and your LSAT score. Then second, I want you to look up the employment data for those schools. The American Bar Association requires every single law school to publish it. You want to find the percentage of graduates getting full-time, long-term, bar passage required jobs. That is the number that matters, not the school's marketing, not the US News rankings, the actual placement rate into real legal jobs. And then third, I want you to find out what those jobs pay. Look at the median starting salary, not the average. The median tells you what a typical graduate earns. The average gets distorted by a few big law salaries. Then you also want to calculate your likely debt, including tuition after any scholarship you would realistically get, living expenses for 3 years, and the interest that builds while you're in school. Then you want to do the math and ask, is the salary you're likely to earn enough to service that debt and still build the life you want? If yes, go. If the answer is unclear, that's a sign you want to improve your LSAT score, target different schools, or negotiate harder for scholarship money before you commit. So just spending 5 minutes on crunching the numbers will tell you more about your future than this entire study can. Now, the study is not wrong. The data they're using are real, and a law degree can be one of the best financial decisions you ever make. But can be and will be are separated by the school you pick, the price you pay, and the plan you have for what comes after. And only your math can help you determine whether it's right for you. And if you can't read the study and spot the gaps in the reasoning, that's still one more sign You should sharpen your analytical skills before you go to law school. And that's what the LSAT's measuring in the first place. Now, if you're looking for help figuring out how this applies to your situation, if you want help getting your LSAT score up, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. That is an open offer, no obligation. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. And if you're just joining, I offer these free lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives. I don't really try to cater to the algorithm in any particular way. I'm just talking LSAT and law school admissions, not the sexiest topic, but I think it's an important one, and hopefully you do too. So please do spread the word, share this in your social medias, to your TikTok, to your group chats, Facebook groups, Discords. Happy to address any questions that might come up in the chat here. Feel free to drop them in. I see Spencer's asking, what is your number one piece of advice for the writing section, and is it as important as logical reasoning or reading comp? So first off, the importance. The writing sample is frankly not that important. Certainly not compared to the logical reasoning or reading comp sections, in part because the writing section's not scored. And there's that saying in business, what gets measured gets managed. The writing sample does not get measured, it's not scored, and so therefore no one's really managing it. Doesn't really matter a whole lot. I'm not saying treat it like a joke, do give it your best effort, but I'd rather you have a point or two more on the LSAT than have a marginally better writing sample. Now, there are exceptions. If you are a non-native English speaker, if your personal statement might raise questions about your writing ability, or the difference in quality between your personal statement and your writing sample might raise some questions. In other words, if your personal statement looks polished and your writing sample looks like trash, that's a red flag, and you want to beef up your writing to look better in the writing sample. But that aside, until they score the writing sample, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And they're not scoring it for the foreseeable future, not in the next year at least. I mean, maybe starting next year they will. They've given some early indications they will score it in the distant future, but not in the short term. Now, in terms of advice for the writing sample, my biggest advice would be to structure your writing clearly. In other words, paragraph breaks, intro paragraph, couple body paragraphs, conclusion. Have a clear thesis statement. Express your opinion straightforwardly. Don't make them hunt for what your opinion is. And so you've got to take a stand, make an argument, have a clear, succinct presentation of your opinion. Lay out a clear roadmap for what you're going to cover in supporting your chosen side, your chosen position. Acknowledge any counterpoints, but then argue in favor of your side. So intro paragraph, couple body paragraphs. Body 1 gives your biggest evidence. Body 2 gives your second biggest evidence. Body 3 acknowledges the weakness of your side, but still downplays the weakness ultimately. And then conclusion just is a wrap up. But while LSAT indicated they will score the writing in the future, that's not now. And so for anyone taking the LSAT in the next year, it's not going to be scored. My guess is maybe in July or August of 2027 is when they're going to start scoring it. See Spencer saying, thank you, planning on signing up for some of the classes now. Awesome, excited to have you on board. You can join through my site, but if you want to talk through particulars or want a more custom personal coaching program, you can book the free tutoring with me through the link in my bio. Now, I wanted to share some thoughts on what makes the LSAT difficult compared to what you might have expected. So you read a sentence on the LSAT, you know every single word in it, but you get to the end and you think to yourself, wait, what did that just say? So you read it again and again, maybe a third time, and now you've burned 30 seconds on one sentence. And so you're behind and you're stressed. And the worst part is you still don't really get it. Most people think this is a focus problem, like maybe you need more sleep. Or maybe you need to concentrate harder. Maybe you're not a strong reader. But that's not what's happening. The LSAT is doing something very specific to your brain on purpose. And once I show you what it is, you're going to read these passages completely differently. Now, I want to show you the 4 tricks the LSAT uses to overload your brain, and then I'm going to give you 2 ways to fight back. Trick number 1 is familiar words with unfamiliar meanings. So take the word economy. You hear that word, you think money, stock market, inflation. But then you're reading an LSAT passage and it says the economy of the author's prose. Of course, that has nothing to do with money. Here, economy means keeping things short and tight, being efficient with words. Same word, totally different meaning, and your brain just got tricked. Because your brain saw the word economy and grabbed the meaning it knows best, the one it's used 1,000 times. You kept reading and the sentence fell apart. So now you've got to go back, let go of the wrong meaning, find the right one, reread the sentence, and hold on to everything else at the same time. That is 5 different steps for translating one word. And the LSAT does this constantly. For example, the word critical. You think that means important. But on the LSAT, it might mean negative or disapproving. Like saying the author is critical of the theory doesn't mean the author thinks it's important, it means the author thinks it's wrong. Or the word qualified. You think that means skilled. But a qualified success means a limited success, a partial one, almost the opposite of what you expected. Or the word argument. In real life, that means a fight. On the LSAT, it means a set of reasons that lead to a conclusion, totally different. Every single one of these eats up brain power, and the LSAT doesn't use just one per paragraph, it stacks them. Trick number 2 is double negatives, like saying, for example, the hypothesis is not without merit. Your brain has to process 2 negatives and figure out they cancel out. It just means the hypothesis does have merit, but your brain had to do a backflip to get there. Or saying, it is not uncommon. That just means it is common. But it takes you an extra beat to figure that out, and that extra beat costs you. Trick number 3, vague reference words. The passage says something like, this phenomenon, or such a claim, or the former. And it's pointing back to something from 1 or 2 sentences ago. So now you've got to hold your place in the current sentence, jump back, figure out what it's referring to, and then come back. And that's a lot of mental juggling. Trick number 4 is abstract language. The LSAT loves to say entity when it means company, or the practice when it means the habit of doing something specific, or this approach when it means this one particular policy. Every time they go abstract, you've got to do the work of making it concrete in your head, and that costs energy. Now, here is why all of this matters so much. Your brain can only juggle about 5 things at once. And that is what the research says. It's not just me talking here. Think of it like you've got 5 slots in your head and that's all you've got. And so watch what happens on a single LSAT sentence. Quote, the critic's argument that the unqualified success of the initiative is not without precedent is, in the estimation of the author, insufficiently critical of the approach's underlying economy. End quote. I doubt anyone could tell me what that means. Even I'm not sure what that means. But let's back up for a second. Let me just walk you through what your brain just went through there. When they say argument, does that mean a fight? No, it means a logical case, slot 1. When they say unqualified success, does that mean they're not skilled enough? No, it means a total complete success, slot 2. When they say not without precedent, that's a double negative. That means it has happened before, that's slot 3. When they say critical, does that mean important? No, it means efficiency, slot 5. 5 slots used up just decoding the words. You've got nothing left to actually think about what the sentence is saying. In plain English, that sentence actually meant the author thinks the critics aren't tough enough when they say the initiative's big success has happened before and might just be about doing things cheaply. That's it, that is all it's saying. But the way it's written, it's almost impossible to get there on a first read. And so, what do you do about this? I've got 2 techniques for you. Technique number 1 is translate as you go. You don't want to wait until the end of the sentence to figure out what it means. You translate each piece as you hit it. So let's say you hit a word that feels a little off, you pause for half a second, you ask yourself, what does this word mean right here, right now? You don't let your brain grab the easy meaning, you pick the right one and then you keep going. Or you see a vague phrase like such a claim. You don't skip past it, you stop and you ask, what claim? Oh, they're talking about the idea that rent control makes housing work. Good, now you've got it locked in. And so you freed up a slot instead of losing one. Or let's say you hit a double negative, like not without merit. So you translate it right there. That means it does have merit, done. That way you're not carrying that twisted phrasing forward in your head, you straighten it out and you move on. Technique number 2, you read for structure first. Before you worry about understanding every word, you figure out the big picture. Who's talking? What side are they on? Are they for something or against something? Most LSAT passages have a simple structure underneath all the fancy language. Someone makes a claim, someone else pushes back, the author weighs in. If you can grab that structure on your first read, you've got a frame to hang everything else on. Now, when you go back to the tricky sentences, you already know the point they're trying to make. You're just filling in the details. And that's way easier than trying to decode everything cold. This is what separates 160 scores from 170 scores on reading comp. I've seen it over and over in 20 years of coaching the LSAT. This is not about reading speed or vocabulary or intelligence. It's just the ability to catch these traps in real time and clear them before they eat up all your brain space, and having a structure in your head so you know where each piece fits. Now, those who score 170 plus aren't smarter than you. They just trained themselves to do this. It's a habit and you can build it. And so here's where you want to start. Next time you practice, start off untimed. And I know it feels wrong when timing's already a problem, but for just a few sections, I want you to try slowing down, catching the tricky word meanings, translating the vague phrases, and simplifying those double negatives. Ask yourself who is arguing what. Say it out loud if you need to. And I know it's going to feel slow at first, and that's fine, because once it clicks, your speed's going to come back and your comprehension's going to skyrocket. And so if you're sitting there rereading LSAT and sentences over and over and thinking something is wrong with you, nothing is wrong with you. The test is built to overload your brain on purpose. And so once you know the tricks it uses, you know how to fight back. So start translating as you go. Read for structure first. It is going to change everything. And if you'd like my help engaging in this process, going down this path, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. Happy to help. In the meantime, happy to address any questions y'all might have on anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. I see Ella is asking, is there typically an upper limit that's realistic based on your initial scores? I'll say that no, I don't think there's an upper limit necessarily on how high you can score, but the question becomes how long will it take you to hit your goal score? And so the lower your starting point, the more time it's going to take to hit a top score. But if you're willing to give it the time, then I do believe anything is possible, because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. It's not intelligence. It's not raw innate ability. It's a test of how much you studied for it and how much you familiarized yourself with the patterns on the test. And so what separates a top scorer from someone who's newer to this is that the top scorer has done more reps. They've done more practice tests. They've gotten more exposure to the patterns of reasoning. And so a top scorer can solve questions faster because they've seen so many others like that question in the past that when they encounter a new one, they're not reasoning through it from scratch under timed conditions on test day when it truly counts. And so the newer student with less exposure is going to have a harder time because they're thinking in real time under the timed conditions of the exam. And when you have a test that's as strictly timed as the LSAT, that's going to be an uphill battle. So just give yourself more time if your starting score is lower. But looking ahead, we've got plenty of LSAT test dates coming up. We've got the June LSAT in 2 months. We've got the August LSAT in 4 months. We've got, after that, September, October, and November. You could take any one of those LSATs, even potentially take all of them, and apply to law school this fall. And so if you want a top score and you're pretty early in the process, give yourself more time. Don't rush it for June. Take it in August or September instead. Give yourself more time. And the nice thing about starting now is that you could still take it in August and apply the second applications open in September, or you could take it in September and still apply the month that applications opened. I see YN's asking, can GPT pass the LSAT? So I guess you're asking if AI can get a top score on the LSAT. I mean, the LSAT is not a strictly pass-fail exam. Last I saw, the ChatGPT was scoring somewhere in the 160s, but still not perfect scores. And it still often gets hard LSAT questions wrong. So I would consider it an unreliable study partner. I do hear more and more people saying they're using AI to study for the LSAT, which I think is kind of a risky proposition because if it's confidently getting LSAT questions wrong and not telling you it's getting them wrong, then you're learning from someone giving you misinformation. It could often be right, but not always. And the problem is that when it's wrong, it doesn't tell you that it's wrong. Just like using LSAT for Dummies contains fake LSAT questions. So I think you're better off using real, actual, official LSAT practice tests, which are available exclusively from the LSAC, the the Law School Admission Council. They give you 4 practice tests for free. You can get the others with your LSAC Law Hub Advantage subscription, well worth the investment. They're giving you 59 numbered exams in the modern LSAT format, no reason to go beyond that. And I know they don't come with explanations, but there are plenty of quality resources out there that will give you human written explanations that are a whole lot more reliable than whatever ChatGPT is going to spin up. In my program, for example, we give you explanations with our on-demand course, but more importantly, we're giving you personal feedback and guidance on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong. Because the thing is that when you're studying for the LSAT on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some more personal support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low hanging fruit. And so we offer personalized coaching programs to meet you where you're at with your current starting point, your goal score, to get you to your goal score on your time frame, considering other obligations you might have like work or school, family obligations and such. And so if you want to talk through what that could look like, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me and we could talk through it together. The link's in my bio and below the video as well. I see Nay is asking, hi Steve, I just sat for the LSAT for the first time on Friday, taking August as well. Awesome, great. Okay, so you just took the April LSAT. Hope it went well. Hope you rocked it. But you're retaking it in August as well, so you've got 4 months, plenty of time to improve your score significantly. I mean, in 4 months, you can really make anything happen. And so I look at what time can you put in over the next 4 months. Can you do 5, 10 hours a week at minimum? Can you do 10, 15, 20 hours a week? The more time you can put in, the higher you can get your score. And then we got to look at what's your goal. So in other words, what kind of number do you want to hit? And then can we work backwards from that goal score to make an action plan to get you from here to there over that time frame? If you want to score a 175, it's going to take more work than if you want to score a 160. But 4 months, again, plenty of time. We typically divide LSAT study plans into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is building a strong foundation, drilling questions by type, getting a better understanding of the proper perspective from which to approach the different sections and the different question types. Then you've got pacing, doing individual timed sections to work on your pacing. And then finally, endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. A lot of students make the mistake of taking full practice tests without building a strong foundation, and then they're burning through valuable limited material. Other students do nothing but drill questions by type, but don't get to full exams. And the thing is that, of course, LSAT test day is not a drill. It's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under real world timed test day conditions, considering the pacing, the time management, and the endurance. And so when we build a study plan for our students, we take you through each one of those phases so that you're spending some time building the foundation, but not delaying the full exams for too long. And so if you had 3 months till your exam, maybe roughly speaking, 1 month for foundational work, 1 month for timed sections, 1 month for full exams. Of course, I'm not necessarily saying that you should delay until the final month for doing full exams. I would start those earlier, but you want to give each month, roughly speaking, a general emphasis or particular focus. I see Jayla Boyd's asking, have you heard of any new requirements for admission? I saw somewhere the writing essay may become a requirement. So the writing sample is required already. You've got to do the writing sample before they will give you your LSAT score. But currently, the writing sample is not scored. LSAC has indicated they will score it at some point in the future. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe roughly a year from now, maybe starting next July. But in the short term, no, the writing sample is not scored. There are no new requirements for admission. The LSAT has not changed other than the removal of logic games about 2 years ago. or the removal of the dual comparative passages for some students on some exams. Maya's asking what I meant by foundational work. So I meant by foundational work just getting a broad understanding of the different types of questions being tested on the LSAT. So you've got roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions like strength and weaken, flaw, parallel, resolve, and so on. You've also got reading comp to work on as well, of course. That's a whole third of the test. And then beyond the question types, you've got pacing and time management, and then full length exams. And so you want to spend the early phases better understanding a solid step-by-step approach for the different question types. Then once you've gotten to reasonable accuracy, roughly 70-80% accuracy untimed, you want to introduce timing to work on how you're allocating time over the course of the section so that you're not running out of time before hitting the end of the section. And then once you're pretty good on your pacing, you want to pull it all together doing full-length timed practice tests, because on test day, you're going to have 4 sections in one sitting of 35 minutes each with only a 10-minute break in the middle. Takes about 2.5 hours. In terms of the prep books, a lot of them are outdated. I mean, some of them are outdated only, and some of them are both outdated and are AI-generated slop. A lot of the books you'll see on Amazon are written by ChatGPT. You could tell because sometimes they left the prompt or other miscellaneous ChatGPT-related stuff still in the manuscript of the book. They forgot to delete it, so that's a pretty obvious tell. A lot of these books also still reference logic games because ChatGPT's training data included logic games, and so they're not aware that logic games have been off the test since June of 2024. That was the last test before they removed logic games, and the test has undergone a lot of more subtle changes over time. After LSAC removed the logic games section in June 2024, and they replaced it with the second score logical reasoning section, they also started including more numerical, quantitative reasoning in the logical reasoning section, more of a focus on formal logic and conditional statements, because they could no longer test those concepts in the logic game section because there is no more logic game section. And so a lot of the books that were published or written before the removal of logic games don't reflect that emphasis. And so for that reason, rather than trying to figure out what was AI generated on Amazon, what was not AI written, I'd say just forget the books entirely. The other benefit is that if you study for the LSAT online, you'll be familiarizing yourself with the software you're going to experience on test day itself. Using LSAC's Law Hub platform is the best place to get familiar with the user interface. They are actually changing the interface starting in August for those of you taking the LSAT after June starting August. One of the reasons students' scores often drop 5 to 8 points from the practice test to the actual exam is because they have not properly simulated test day conditions, given the software on the exam and given the format changes in recent years. And so I'd say best to study for the LSAT like it's going to be on test day, taking it online. Rennie's asking, how do you feel about going into electrical engineering for undergrad and then going to law school? It's a unique background for law school, that's to be sure. The downside would be that anything STEM, anything engineering is likely to harm your GPA. And so you are at a relative disadvantage majoring in a subject that is more brutally curved than anything humanities or pre-law, which doesn't have the same brutal curve. That being said, law schools do like to see more unique backgrounds, unique majors. So that's useful context to help rather than yet another poli-sci major. I was a poli-sci major, by the way, and not throwing any shade there. But engineering, unique background, that's good. Harder to get that top GPA, that's bad. So consider that. Consider that when you're deciding what to major in. If you already majored in it, of course, it's a done deal. It is what it is. If your GPA is lower than it otherwise would be, just get a higher LSAT score to compensate. Katsu says, I heard they're deleting the LSAT. Yeah, I hear that every single week. There's been a lot of news and headlines over the past couple of years, clickbait around the LSAT going away. The truth is that even though there are a decent number of law schools that technically say they don't require the LSAT, almost everybody is still getting in with an LSAT score on their record. And so the headlines don't change what you should ultimately be doing with your time, which is getting the highest possible LSAT score to maximize your admissions and also maximize your scholarship money that you could get. Nay says, I've been doing about 12 hours a week. My goal is a 155 LSAT score for HBCU law school. 12 hours a week of studying is pretty good if you've got 4 months till August. My concern here is the goal. A 155 LSAT score is a pretty low goal, to be frank. I want you shooting higher for a couple of reasons. One is that, like I said before, student scores often drop from the practice to the actual. And so if you want a 155 on the LSAT, you want your practice tests going in to be at least a 163 or higher. So you've got a buffer in case your score drops, which the scores often do. The second thing is that a 155 might get you into law school, but is it going to get you scholarship money? Is it going to get you a full ride? I'd be surprised. So don't just aim for a given law school's median LSAT score from last year, because first, that's already a year out of date. Those are last year's numbers, and law schools are always looking to raise their medians. The other thing is that it may not get you scholarship money. My guess is, like most students, most people are looking for scholarship money for law school, and so you don't want to just get in. You want to be above the 75th percentile on the LSAT. And if your GPA is below the median, you want your LSAT to be even higher than that to compensate. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your goals. Low Just Chillin's asking, if a school's median is 151, could they accept a 147? Yes, they could. I mean, they can accept whoever they want. The question is, are they going to? If they can get applicants with stronger numbers, they're not going to take you if you've got a number that's 4 points below their median. Now, if your GPA is incredible, if you've got above a 4.0, then sure, maybe you'll get in with a lower score, but why set yourself up for an unlikely outcome and then just hoping? Why not apply with stronger numbers to better your odds? I mean, you only get one shot, right? Unless you want to reapply next year, or you want to get waitlisted and then retake to try and get off a waitlist. But it's a lot easier if you can just get in off the bat because your numbers are really strong. And so if the school's median is a 151, why would you bother applying with a 147 unless your GPA and rec letters and all that are just killer? I think the better approach is just retake the LSAT, get above a 151, and then apply. You'll have much better odds, and you'll also get more scholarship money, make a better first impression. And I say this because it's a lot easier to retake the LSAT than it is to redo your undergraduate GPA. And this relates to another question we got here from David. Is it even feasible to attempt being admitted to law school if my undergrad GPA was trash? And so my advice to David is don't redo undergrad. Get a higher LSAT score to compensate for a lower GPA. So my answer to David is different than my answer to Low Just Chillin', because David's saying trash GPA. My answer is retake the LSAT, get a higher LSAT score. For Low Just Chillin', with a subpar LSAT score, I'll say 147, which is below medians, why not just retake the LSAT? Because you can. It's a single day, 2.5 hours. You could retake the LSAT in June or retake it in August and apply next application cycle. Your LSAT score is 1 day, 2.5 hours. To retake it just requires taking another practice test maybe once a week, reviewing it in depth. That might be all you have to do. In contrast, redoing undergrad is a lot of money and tuition and a lot of time. Not so easy to do that one, but LSAT is much easier. Caleb asks, what should you do when you start running out of unique LSAT sections or questions for practice? Well, there are 8,000 released LSAT questions if you really run out of them. There are 59 numbered practice tests in LSAC's Law Hub platform 101 to 159. You've then got drill sets and individual sections on Law Hub as well. There are also a handful of, I'll say, out of print exams that didn't make it into Law Hub for whatever reason. So you could explore all of those. But then my question is, if you were to redo those unique sections and questions you've done before, would you get perfect 180s on them? Probably not. There's probably still something you'd get wrong again, and maybe you'd even choose the exact same wrong answer choice again, which means You haven't yet learned the lesson from those questions, so why not redo those first? That's where I would start. That's where your analysis should go. That's where your in-depth review should go. If you want to talk through what a better review process could look like, that's kind of what we focus on in our coaching programs. Happy to talk you through it. The link to book a free tutoring lesson, by the way, is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Happy to meet with you or anyone else personally now or later to talk through this. Foreign Ting says, haircut looking sharp. Thank you. Yeah, it's long overdue. Let's see. Got a question from Hart asking, my GPA isn't all that great, but my work experience in the legal field is unique, plus I've got a good LSAT. Okay, so I mean, you are where you are. Again, like it's not that easy to redo undergrad, so I wouldn't stress about the GPA. Your other factors sound pretty good. I guess the question would be, you've got a good LSAT. Can you make it a great LSAT? Can you get stronger rec letters? Can you polish your personal statement and your other application essays? And the reason I always keep talking about retaking the LSAT is because that is the most important factor in admissions, and it's the easiest thing to boost. And law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores. They only take into account the highest LSAT score on your record, which means there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. If you do worse, no big deal. The previous score still counts. If you retake it and do better, now you've got a higher score on your record. I see Forever Pessimistic asks, would you suggest that someone with a 3.67 GPA go to graduate school in order to raise their GPA? I don't think my LSAT score will ever be good. I'm first gen. Okay, so not to be pessimistic here, but your grad school GPA doesn't get factored into your calculations for admissions chances, unfortunately. Just the reality of the situation, just telling it to you straight here. I mean, for law school admissions, it's only your undergrad GPA and your LSAT score that count when they are putting your numbers into their formulas. The formula, by the way, is called an admissions index. It's a combination of your LSAT score and your GPA combined together. For virtually every law school, they weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergrad GPA, but sadly, grad school GPAs are not factored into this, and so there would be 0 point in going into grad school just to raise your GPA, and of course, grad school's not cheap. It's a pretty costly way to do something that would not really have much impact on your chances. So no, I wouldn't do that. Maya's asking, I'm a junior, I've never taken the LSAT before, and I'm new to studying it. Should I take the June LSAT? No, I wouldn't take June just because it's less than 2 months away and you're totally brand new to the LSAT. Typically takes more than 7 or 8 weeks to achieve your fullest potential on the LSAT. I would say if you're brand new to this and you're starting now, maybe August is a better time frame, gives you almost 4 months, plenty more time, more than double the duration to improve your LSAT score significantly. That's where that's the test that I would target. So that's where I'd focus. And again, you want to have a proper study plan, working you through the different LSAT sections, the different LSAT question types. We can map it out for you week by week, day by day, if you want to talk through what that could look like. I'm happy to discuss it with you on a call. For those just joining, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. And for those just joining, I'm doing these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. In addition to these daily live Q&As, I'm also doing an additional live or 2 per day, where I am working through every single published LSAT reading comprehension passage. My goal is to create a comprehensive set of free explanations for every single reading comp passage ever. I'm roughly a quarter of the way through, adding more every day. If you want to access those, there's a playlist on my YouTube channel, linked in my bio as well, where you could see all those lives and all the previous lives I've ever done going back several years on the YouTube channel. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best.